Hey everybody, it's Shivoso and Haiku, Relationship Medicine, uh, Chapter 2. Here we go, the second one. I'm super excited to be talking with her again this week, and yeah, everything seems to be like happening at once. But yeah, why don't you tell us what we were talking about before about the podcast you heard.
Sure. Well, Shivoso had asked me if there's any themes we wanted to focus on for this um, chapter, and I listen to a podcast called Subject to Power pretty regularly. It's certainly a radical feminist podcast. And what's the title? Do you have the title in front of
Yeah,
you?
yeah,
The one.
it's by by Heidi Gottner Abendroth, and she's a German scientist. Matriarchal Societies of the Past and the Rise of Patriarchy, West Asia and Europe, by Heidi Gottner Abendroth.
Yeah, it's really brilliant. I mean, there's so many of these, what I would consider underground um, radical feminists. And I don't know even much about that title. I mean, they're just archaeologists, but their findings in relation to what the standard default is results in this kind of radical feminist lens. But they really are just doing archaeology and then interpreting their own findings through their lens of being women. So yeah, it's only radical feminism in relation to patriarchy.
Yeah,
It's
only
not.
only if you're easily offended, and sort of radically close
By
minded.
women, right, by women just having their own opinions and stories and like, oh, like interpreting paintings on ancient pottery and then like weaving historical narratives that are really like, avant-garde or like very like alternative relative to like the status standard that we've been, I think, indoctrinated with.
Yeah, the standard
Um,
narrative, it's even got a
um,
name. The standard narrative is, blah blah blah, and it's actually was really 18th century, 17th century kind of like conceptions that just sort of drifted through and became some foundational assumptions that, we've all grew up learning and holding on to, and then trying to build this whole structure of the past, which of course is like not pure speculation, but so much of it is based on assumptions and guesswork. And so it's easy to get those biases, like just entrenched biases about how things actually were.
well, and I mean, I've heard several accounts. Like last night, I was listening to one of my favorite historians. Her name's Max Dashu, Dashu,
Mhm.
and she has a whole like movement slash like online archive called Suppressed Histories. And she had a full ride to Harvard back in the 70s and immediately quit the university because she knew that she would never be taken seriously. And she
Right?
just became an independent historian and scholar. And I love listening to her. Honestly, listening to women historians, herstories, mythographers, myth writers, like myth analyzers. When I listen to these women's findings, and there's scientific and poetic, but when I listen to their findings, it's really like this cooling salve or this balm of
Yeah,
like,
right. It's a
wow, they're
validation of intuitions in a
yeah,
way.
it's that,
Yeah,
but it's also like there is actual evidence that there existed pre-patriarchal conditions that were um, peaceful, relative, and peace defined not in relativity to war, but peace defined in relativity to peace, and living in harmony with nature, with a universal, like kind of goddess religion that was not centrally commanded by any means, but was like kind of intuitively and innately uh, adopted by these cultures who were living in such harmony with the earth and
right.
each
Because
other.
the evidence, is number one, is those cultures like led to us. Like we're all still here,
Right.
right? So whatever they were doing was working for like a hella long time. I mean, not just a few hundred
Long
years or a
time.
thousand years. It was the Paleolithic, so it's like, oh, 30,000 years
Yeah.
ago.
Oh, like
And,
longer. They're
you know,
saying, I mean, I've seen accounts definitely 40,000 years ago for sure. I would say I've even read and seen accounts of longer, up to
well, it
100,000
goes
years
all the way
ago.
back because we've got, I mean, she even talks about, I started reading her book and, um, just even the standard narrative admits it's like, okay, Homo sapiens 2.5 million years ago, but the first evidence that we have of like, culture 40,000 years ago, that we got some stone tools and things like that. But there was a big gap in there where there's a whole bunch of Homo types, that whole species or the whole branch that were all intelligent to a certain degree. They were, they were animals with opposing thumbs. And so they were doing things. They were existing in the environment um, for a long time and managed not to fuck it up, right? For a long time. And we don't know. There's a lot we don't know. Like, really, what was it like day to day? What was, you know, in her book, it was really interesting um, that she said, well, it's probable that, we discovered how to eat meat by eating carrion. And I'm like, no, you didn't. No, we didn't. That
Eating what?
eating meat. Like she was her one of her theses is that we were vegetarian Homo species, Homo
Hmm.
erectus, Homo habilis, where they found out, yeah, they eat roots and vegetables because the bone structures in their teeth and things like that. But she has to guess. They have to guess, like, well, why did we start eating meat? Right. And how did we start doing that? And I'm like, well, no, you didn't start eating carrion, because if you ever smell a rotting
What's
animal,
carrion?
dead animals, right?
Oh,
It's
okay.
like, okay, no, not likely. Sensitive noses is like, no, that's rotten. That's gross. But you eat
Yeah,
bugs. We eat bugs. Bugs are great, and then
absolutely.
small little rodents go right next to bugs, and you're like, oh, well, I caught one. That tasted good. And, it just sort of grows from there. It's like, yeah, this wasn't Homo sapiens invention. Animals know how to do this.
Eating meat. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, watch it. I was like laughing because I was like, watch a 2-year-old and everything goes in their mouth, everything, unless it's really grotesque. But even the grotesque, they will try it. And if it nutritionally sort of like they respond to it, they'll just go back to it again. They'll just make it taste good, right? Because we can make things that taste terrible taste good, but obviously drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes. But anyway, I was just um pointing out or laughing. It's like, yeah, we're just guessing a lot about these things. But what I really loved was just the pushback on the standard narrative of, men invented this and men are great and empire is great. And, we should definitely conquer everything. And, it's like, oh yeah, that's why we're here. Right. And so
Well,
that's
and that narrative is a recent, a
what
very
I mean. It's
recent
like
in terms of like human history.
a few hundred years ago, they're kind of like,
Yeah.
well, the Bible has a lot of that kind of going in. But the first writings were all by the time this was I guess we want to call it the patriarchy, but was well established, the I wish we had a different name for it because
Well, there are other alternatives. There, what's her name? The author of The Chalice and the Blade, really great book.
yeah, I love that book.
She calls it the dominator culture.
That's what I was
People
just
like
thinking. The
that.
dominator,
Yeah.
the dominator, it's not even a culture. It is a culture, but it's also like an idea or a meme or a kind of like alternative reality, right? It's a reality tunnel that is really effective in the short term. Very left brain, very like without thinking about consequences or relationships. It's just get the job done, right? Which I don't know, is that really just the prerogative of the male? Somewhat, but I don't know if we can really completely say it's that, but at the same time, it's a way of life that is about domination. It's about winning at all costs. It's about me and everything else is other, right? And that's
Yeah,
where the problem lies, is othering the rest of the universe.
for sure. I mean, I guess I'm like stumbling over my words in this because like I don't have the same expertise that someone like Max Stashu has, or this German archaeologist, historical scientist has. Like, there are like huge bodies of work in this camp, in this category, that like are an integral part of the narrative. And even if I could sit here and kind of regurgitate exactly the things they know, like the creation of patriarchy, another great book, I will say a few things that I think just general broad strokes are like important. Like, one, we have to start understanding that like our script, or like our program of what we think history is, has been like completely abbreviated and controlled by like certain voices, and those certain voices being men who like literally would like be in archaeological digs, find a sculpture of a woman or a yoni and throw it away because they wanted nothing to do with it. Whether
Right,
it was
right,
just,
yeah.
it's like they're like, oh, they're either avoiding it or they're like deliberately saying like that's not going to be part of the narrative I'm creating. I remember I once opened up a kid's pop-up book about dinosaurs, and like they was a short excerpt talking about how like these what are they called, paleontologists,
Hmm.
the paleontologists were literally like in such competition with each other, they were throwing out like each other's discovery of bones and stuff. Like,
Right, yeah,
this
they
is
would.
like our narratives have been like constructed by like competing men who have like power over kind of like impetus, and like, and I think that like for what's most important is like if we consider something default, like we need to that's the exact point we need to start questioning it, especially in the context of a failing empire.
Yeah, yeah. When the evidence is like, oh, this isn't actually working. We tried this for the last 10,000 years, and it repeatedly falls into the same trap of like, okay, empire grows, grows, grows. There's a little like a sort of an illusion of peace, and then it rots from the inside out, and then the outside comes and collapses it. Something happens that finally, it gets fragile and shatters, and so we're in this
Well, and that
very fragile
fragility,
state right now.
right, and that fragility is a direct opposite to resilience. And we find resilience in things that are biologically reinforced by diversity, by radical inclusion, which is, now we're going to start talking about principles. And I think just circling back, because, I think you and I could talk about patriarchy. I think it is important to label it patriarchy because, in my personal opinion, it is a system or material conditions created by men, and that is what I'm exploring when I'm doing this, historical analysis and independent scholarship around pre-patriarchal conditions. But I think what I don't want to just get off too center here or like off course, because like what really inspired me with the podcast was like what made these matrilineal societies flourish, because they
Right, right.
what made them so resilient, flourish, what made them, I'd say, peaceful. And
Yeah,
again, not in relative to war, but in relative to peace, and what made them ornate and opulent. Like, we have also in the patriarchal narrative history, like our ancestors were these like, loincloth wearing, brutish, infantile people. And that's just like simply not what we are finding in the newest archaeology that is being dug up by these quote unquote radical feminist scholars. So that what she mentioned was that these people had, our ancestors had really formidable peace skills, is what she called them. And these peace skills allowed them to have very strong relationships, not with internally, but like externally, if there was even that binary of internally and externally. Like, they had, and this was based off of inferences around their trading abilities, their ability to, because they'll find ornaments, artifacts, stones, tools from different parts of the world in different parts of the world. And so then
right.
you'd have
Yeah, even
to,
across the oceans, they'll
exactly.
find these artifacts that are, traded long distances
Right.
across
And I
continents.
think this is why we get we get some fetishes around things like the story of Atlantis, for example, because it's not off. These are not off. That's simply like Gobekli Tepe. Like, there have been very ancient, very highly like um high civilization and in the far past. I think that's almost like I think that's being accepted pretty generally
It
and
has to be
widely
a
now.
given. It has to be a
Yeah.
given because it's they have the same brains that we have. They have the same, we're genetically identical to people from, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 years ago. They were just as smart as you and I. And they're like looking at things around them and saying, how can I make this better? I don't want to starve during the winter. I don't want my kids to die. How do we go about this? And it's like, um, even though they didn't have as much technical stuff like metalworking, the kind of technology we have
Well,
today.
I would argue that they probably had what I would consider higher technology that isn't in the framework of what we consider high
Yeah, that's what I
technology.
mean. It would be, but they would be oriented towards obviously something that was naturally available. It was abundant. People could figure it out. Everybody had access to it. It's like, oh, I invented the mud brick. It's like, here, everybody check this out.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about like hemp bricks, which are actually like carbon sinks, and like hemp being such a universally versatile material, and like also a biodegradable nutrient that once returned to the earth became a sustenance for the earth. So if our ancestors were truly living in like very like what you could call like permaculture, pagan, pastoral, peaceful clans and utilizing high tech, high biotech, it would be reabsorbed by the earth and like
Yeah, it would just
recycled.
it would disappear, because it
Yeah.
doesn't have that machined edge thing. I'm reminded of the facts we learned while we were in Costa Rica doing the green residency, permaculture residency, about how they found that the Amazon, when they really looked at it,
Right.
from satellites and then exploring, they found out it had been like cultivated and gardened for thousands and thousands of years.
Right.
It wasn't until the white people came and the diseases all wiped out all the tribes that it started to kind of rejungle itself into this, less than habitable place. Because what do humans do? What do Homo sapiens do is they garden, they cultivate, they actually husband or create ideal conditions around them. They'll cut down the things that are in the way and they'll like cultivate the things that are useful, that'll bring game, that'll bring food for them, that, it's makes sense. That's how I would do it. It'd be like, well, yeah, I'm not going to just let it go. I every day, what am I going to do? I'm going to go out and, pull down these horrible choking vines that have big spikes on them, the thorns on them, and we'll use the thorns for other things. But, I can't even walk through my path. It keeps getting covered up by these. I'm just gonna cut it down. It's like I'll use my stone axe or whatever. So yeah, I just believe that we sort of developed as the cultivators, and that we've gotten away from that due to some errors of thinking, errors of motivation, right? It's like I think what she was talking about in the podcast was, how these ideas started in small seed areas and then spread out around the world until it became normalized, to be at war pretty much constantly, and constantly having to expand territory. Because if you're not growing as an empire or a company, right, this is the same thing as corporate. If you're not growing, you're dying. And it's like, what the fuck? That's like cancer. It's like, wait a minute.
Right. And that's exactly what we say in our cycle health or cycle awareness circles, like constant growth is cancer. And one thing, I teach in these cycle awareness courses or conversations is like the cycle is, I mean, really simply, it's just like a duality gyrosphere. It's like there's the inhale and then the exhale, or there's like
Right.
there's like the waning and the waxing and then the waning, or there's the summer, spring and summer, and then the autumn and fall. Like there's just kind of rise in energy, and then there's almost this like retreat or like rest,
Birth
and
and
it,
death,
or birth and death. Yeah.
old age, right? It's like, okay, you just start to like, things start to go to pieces until finally you go back completely to pieces, right?
And then our mythology and religion that was born in patriarchy and what I would say Abrahamic religions as the root of those stories and religions and myths that are so deeply ingrained in our cellular, so deeply ingrained in our like DNA to a degree, like we're like living out these stories. And I would say that that constant growth is part of that. It's like, it was just like the removal of the feminine. So if you just like consider like maybe even just like masculine as like the form, and then the female as the formless, like the penis and the vagina, the ligum and the yoni. It's like there's the form and the formless,
Right.
and
As
like
above, so below.
the formless is what the formless, or the exhale, or the waning, or like the winter, that, or the energy of the feminine, the receptive, is exactly what we need to be calling back in right now, because we're looking at what happens when you have 7, 10,000 years of unchecked growth.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing is, I think finding that belief, number one, that there is a balance point between growth and decay that is a sweet spot, and it
Mm.
doesn't require necessarily in the universe doesn't accept constant growth, nor does it accept constant decay. Like everything isn't going
Right,
to heat death
right,
in the
right.
universe. It's like we're very primitive
Exactly.
when it comes to our cosmologies. But
Well,
but
and then now I was thinking about how you can apply this to relationships. Like this is all playing out in the arena of our personal intimate relationships, and like our dyadic relationships, our community relationships, our friendships. Like I was
yeah,
just thinking about how like that quote unquote like butterfly falling in love phase is like the growth of something,
right.
and
It's
it's like
definitely a
that's
fertilization and a seeding of something potential, right? It isn't the oak tree yet, but it's a sprout that's very excited and powerful, right? And kind of necessary. Um, yeah, to get it back to the relationship, the kind of dominator model, the hunter model, the pursuer and the pursued,
well,
the
I want to be
prey.
careful with the word hunter because it's women were hunters as well. This is
I
also
know, but I'm
like
just saying that
Artemis.
the idea of, prey and
Oh,
hunter.
predator and prey.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So because women can be hunters in relationship as well. I would encourage women to be
Absolutely.
seeking, relationship with the highest quality, men they can find, and help that happen, so that it's not just up to the men to be the pursuers of women, which is a big responsibility. So that's a whole thing we could really talk about, is how that dynamic creates a lot of issues for both genders and both the pursuit, and not even genders, just depends on who's getting pursued and who
Yeah.
wants to be pursued, right? And who doesn't want to be pursued. Um, there's a lot of politics in a micro sense, between like consent, being pursued with consent. Um,
Sure.
you know,
Yeah. I mean, that is definitely a whole rabbit hole in and of itself. Like
well, it goes
my,
back to that hunter or the predator prey thing of like, I'm going to pursue you whether you want me to or not.
I wonder if the predator prey thing, like, I don't know. I'm in such a I'm not even whimsical. I'm in such a state of like kind of unforming or unraveling so many of my preconceived kind of notions around, especially around binaries, but it's like predator and prey. I wonder if that's even like a framework that was a projection of some patriarchal ideology. Like
Right?
I think about the frogs, the green tea monkey frogs, who have no natural predators in the wild, so they say, but they come to the tribes and who extract the medicine or the poison medicine from their their skin or epidermis, and like there's stories that the frogs actually just like give themselves. Like it's more like this symbiosis. I think that like is a framework that I feel like a lot more like drawn to in terms of like a projective imagination onto nature. Like I think either way we're going to be projecting something onto
Oh
nature, but
yeah, well,
also nature is projecting onto us. So it is this like, feedback loop. But I do believe that like there's something beyond the predator prey side,
absolutely. I
framework.
mean, that's kind of what we're searching for. And I do want to disclaimer. I was brought up in the heart of the patriarchy. I was brought up deep in these stories and mythologies around relationship. And it was only through my wanting things to be different, having gone through the cycle of falling in love and then breaking up and divorce and marriage and all of the things that I was like, wait a minute, this is not what the story says it is, for one thing. And isn't there a better way? And that's been my
Mm-hmm.
like thing. But I'm deeply programmed with the patriarchy. I was born in 1958 during the just before things started to crack. Um, and so it's taken me a long time to get here, but that's part of the motivation was like, gee, this isn't working out the way they told me it would. It wasn't the romantic dream that we were all, find the princess and be the cool guy and
I
all.
mean, those are programs that you're referencing that are, I even just today before our call, I was like feeling them in my system, like leaving my system because I'm actively working on composting them right now and like
Mm,
seeing like what fertile soil, and these are all like metaphors, but they're also like not like these programs are like actually like chemical. Like I was certainly addicted to cycles of falling in love and breaking up. You could call it like stimulating then soothing, or like like big intense romances that were just like full of, you say no, norepinephrine,
norepinephrine and dopamine and
dopamine,
serotonin and
all of those
yeah,
things like just flooded. And then like
oxytocin.
the complete like extreme opposite of like crisis, literally. And then like seeking ways, usually through sex, and falling in love again or refalling in love, with the same partner again, and going through those like cycles, which you could call an abuse cycle, right? It's like tension builds, acute incident. I'm literally recanting the abuse cycle. Like tension builds, an acute incident, then there's reconciliation, and then tension builds, an acute incident,
Right,
reconciliation.
right.
That, and these extremes, like stimulating and soothing. And I mean, my body has been like biologically conditioned, programmed into that cycle, which I believe, and this is the kind of point of the whole podcast, is directly connected to like our myths, our stories, our patriarchal programs that we're unlearning in real time very necessarily. But
Right,
I
through
guess like
suffering.
through suffering, yeah. It's like how,
Oh,
I
ow,
mean,
that didn't work.
yeah, it's like, yeah, there has to be a better way. And I think symbiosis is kind of hitting a node or hitting a chord of resonance. It's like symbiosis is like a really beautiful observation in nature if we're like, kind of taking a biomimicry um approach. It's like we look at nature as we
Yeah,
look at the wilderness as a
we have to look at
teacher.
models. We have to have other models of how this goes than the story that we came up, the romantic model, which only showed up in the medieval times, 16th century, 15th century. It's all new stuff, it's like stories we made up that we believe because, of course we were inculcated into us. Look at every romantic comedy. Look at every tragic romance, at every bad guy, good guy, everything. It's all the same story
I
about
mean, I
women,
think
you
if
know.
I mean personally, I think it's like when men wanted reproductive control over women is when this all kind of started.
Yeah,
I
that
mean,
was
it's
what,
like,
going back to the podcast, that was one of the
yeah,
things. It's like, oh, well, yeah, we were breeding cattle. So
right.
what's the difference when we, it's like breed women.
Well, and the only way for a man to know that his baby is his baby is he ensures that his woman is monogamous with him. He doesn't have to be
Yeah,
monogamous.
there's a lot of
He,
good reasons why this came about. You know, uh, STDs, right? And a virgin will unlikely to have STDs. And so you get, children that don't have STDs. But um, all of that, there's reasons why it exists, but those reasons don't necessarily make it imperative or required to be that way. And that's the
well,
whole, like,
yeah.
okay, now we're smart enough to realize this doesn't work. What else can we do? How else? And like you were saying, symbiosis, look at nature. How do collaborations happen that are mutually beneficial? So it's,
Medicinal,
yeah,
relationship
win-win.
medicine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
win-win, medicinal, healing even, right?
Net positive. I mean, this is
That
what we're
positive.
talking about is regenerative technology, which is like a burgeoning, I guess, like modality in some ways. Like we're leaving a lot of like sustainability behind. And it's actually really funny. I remember hearing a permaculturist once describe 90s, early 2000s sustainability as like they use the analogy of a marriage. They're like, do you want your marriage to be sustainable or do you want it to be regenerative?
Right.
Like,
It's
do you
like,
want to just like sustain something, which is like pretty much a zero sum game? Or do you want something that is like literally feeding net positivity, you
right.
know?
It's generative, you know? It's
Exactly.
interesting because, of course, the metaphor comes right back to why we're doing what we're doing. It's like relationship permaculture is a way of cultivating relationships that are not only win-win for the individuals in it, but for the community around them, the environment even around them wins because they're together. They're like more synergistically working to improve the vibe, that the reality that everyone lives in, rather than the me, I want this, I want that, you know, and we really did get programmed about. I noticed that, you know, every romance is really this incredibly narcissistic endeavor of like, I
Yeah.
want you so bad. I have to have you. You
Yeah.
know, and so of course it moves over into, you know, non-consent and worse, you know, because it's like, and this is not just men. It's just a kind of a, like we all got inculcated with this sort of romantic ideal of the chase and the conquering and the having and the, you know, happily ever after with no effort kind of thing. You know, it's like, oh, now we can just live in our little bubble
Well,
of
yeah,
love,
and
right? It's like, no, you can't just live in your little
no,
bubble of love. You're gonna have to like,
no.
what are you gonna do with all this juice? You know, you're gonna make babies, you're gonna, you know, and raise families that are like super generative. How are you gonna take that energy and turn it
And give
into,
it back.
yeah,
Yeah,
fertilizer for, you know, everything else?
totally.
Build strong
Exactly.
communities, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's like you're basically finding a power source when
right,
you are, and that power source can either be depleted through narcissistic ideation and greed, or it can be generative through like using that power to turn back into like your creative propensity.
right. Yeah, if you don't do it properly, you'll notice that your body gets really sick and tired. You know, if you've ever gone through the, as you, we all have gone through the cycle of falling in love, you don't sleep much, you fuck all the time, you know, you don't eat as well, you're just busy, right? And then you kind of, it sort of coasts for a minute, and then it starts to do the breakup thing, and you're just absolutely wrecked. And by the time you get done, your body is like depleted, like for months, years,
Totally.
you know, and it's like, oh, well, wait a minute. That didn't generate energy because it was all turned inward. It was all about me and them doing their me thing. And it wasn't like, hey, we got all this juice. What are we going to do with it? You know, it's like, how can
Right.
we,
It's like, are you the alchemist or are you a vampire?
right, right,
And that the difference would be like an alchemist, like, is like, let's just compare like falling in love to like finding this like elixir of life or something, like some rare flower that only exists in some valley on top of a hill. Like, you know, it's like, and you found it, and it's like, like, it can become generative if you were an alchemizer of that, meaning like you actually like maybe extract part of it and then like somehow like turn it into some sort of like regenerating elixir and like you
right. Or
use it
only
over
take part
time.
of it, you know, only take part of
Right.
it and cultivate the rest
An
because,
essence of it. You take a
yeah, the
flower essence
essence,
of it.
right? Because I
Right.
have seen falling in love, the whole process, heal people. It does. It is extremely healing for both physical, psychologically. It's an incredible juice of life,
Huge.
you know, and having great orgasms and having
Oh yeah.
lovemaking, super healing, but you know, only up to a certain point. Excessive, and you can drain yourself if you're
Well,
just
anything can become a poison or a medicine depending on how you use it.
right. And we're just
So
using it
the
wrong because we're in scarcity consciousness, we're in grasping and greed. You know, people aren't loved enough, even as children. And so we
well,
grow up
that's it.
hungry. And
That's it.
then they're able to sell us a lot of stuff. We are able to sell ourselves a lot of stuff through this scarcity feeling around love and you know, reaching for love. And I gotta have the right perfume, I gotta have the right clothes, I gotta, you know, I gotta look like have the right shape. You know, everything is about this
Mm.
attracting the perfect ideal mate. And then there's no technologies that like, how do you actually conduct yourself in such a way that that becomes generative and sustainable? It's like all it is, it's just the capture. The
Hmm.
big deal is just the capture, so you get that rush, you know. And like I said, it can be healing for a minute, or but it can
But
often
is it
take away the moment.
healing? Is it healing when it's healing momentarily until the
Right. That's
crisis
what I mean.
ensues?
It takes away more than it gives if you don't
Again, it's a zero
dance
sum game in
properly.
that sense.
Yeah,
It's a zero sum game in that sense. So it's, and
exactly.
what you said in like us not being loved as children, I was thinking literally the same thing in the context of this conversation and thinking how like that's kind of the recursive loop. And for those of you who don't know what a recursive loop is, it's I think a computer science reference where it's like algorithms can get stuck in this loop that like where it's like a degenerative loop in a way because it's not integrating with any other systems, but it's
Just
similarly
burns
like if
energy.
our yeah, so if our like parents were bred to basically or farmed essentially to become consumers and didn't have the time capacity tools knowledge resources frameworks of partnership and love to nurture us enough like and then we're left with a serious deficits biochemically and then we're like also fed programs of romantic comedies Disney etc and then I'm just speaking from experience like that was a fancy language but I'm just literally speaking from experience like I did not receive enough emotional attention and love from my parents and they loved me to death and they thought they were doing the best they could by me and I
Right.
have complete and total respect for what they could do with what they had and I know that like I've been seeking like big doses of that elixir, that flower of life, that love from these partners, expecting a lot from them in that
Right. It's
sense,
like
like
stacked
reparent.
on top of the parental thing, and then it gets utilized um by our marketing system to reinforce and validate that hunger as love, and so we call it falling in love, and you're just falling in limerence, you're falling in all
Right.
sorts of things, but you're definitely not in love yet. That doesn't happen for a while.
Well,
I
what an
love
amazing thing that in this moment, like we can start becoming the alchemists and defining our own frameworks for love, like healthy, regenerative love.
That's what we did. We did a thing way back and made romantic love up, and now we're going to have to rethink it because it's not working anymore. There's one of my theses is that the dyadic family for raising children doesn't work. You
No,
actually need an extended family, and we're
correct.
naturally designed to have extended families so that receiving enough love from two people who are busy like on survival is
Right.
unreasonable, even in the best
Impossible.
intended
It's
parents,
impossible.
yeah, are
Exactly.
still going to have to kind of do some shortcuts. Hey, turn on the TV, or leave me alone, kid. Go out in the yard and play. It's like
Right.
don't
Or
watch
here's a
what
screen.
yeah,
Here's an
don't watch what
iPad.
I'm doing and learn how to live life. Leave me alone, kid. I gotta, because what I'm doing seems so abstract. It's like I'm doing the bills. It's like, hey, you want to learn math? You don't have time for that shit. We're like, no, I gotta finish the bills and get on because I'm exhausted. I just worked all day. It's yeah, the industrial society kind of really ripped the family apart, and the consequence is a lot of hungry ghosts in our psyches that are looking for
Mm-hmm.
love, and now it's getting sold back to us and
Mm.
reiterated and kind of spiraled, and so it's like it's a self-reinforcing kind of thing, and so it's hard to break out of it until you actually break. I think having
Mm.
a broken heart is like this opportunity to wake up, as painful as it is. I think you had the experience of finally going slap, slap, slap. I've done it enough times. I'm like, wait a minute, this is not working. It's like, you keep thinking, is me? What's wrong with me? I keep choosing the wrong guys. What's up with that? Now, this is the same
Yeah.
thing for me, choosing the wrong partners because I didn't have a metric, and it didn't have any way of like knowing what constituted a good partner. All I was doing was feeling the attraction and the
Mm-hmm.
yes, the possibility, the mutuality of like that yes was enough to like start the whole
Mm-hmm.
cascade going, and that was enough to like make some kids. And then kids, it's like, okay, the business of the kids, but the relationship itself was not being nurtured. We didn't have
Mm.
any clue how to cultivate a generative relationship
Mm.
in that context of two working parents. I had four kids, and it was just like, hey, I feel lucky that we all survived it. We did okay, but that's not good enough for creating the world we want to live in.
Well, you
Can't
just
just,
like hit so many nails on the head
yep,
just now.
yeah.
You were just on your flow, your Shivoso flow.
Well, that's
Oh
just my
yeah.
story, you know. That's what led me here to the
Yeah.
relationship medicine.
Well, and okay, so I just want to go full circle back to like the peace skills. So peace skills, like relationship skills, like what are like hard or soft like skills, like and like let's define some peace skills because I think, and this is in doing so in the aim of like how are we going to be nurturing healthy relationships or really just generating the meme of what is a healthy symbiotic generative relationship. And it starts with like the foundation or skeletal system of like skills and principles. I
Right?
think really it really and like I think I love the idea of having peace skills. I consider myself to have peace skills. And I've been thinking about this today, especially as I was applying for that job. Like, what is a peace skill? And like there was actually a great book I read many years ago when I was a teacher called Difficult Conversations. And it was written by 3 Harvard law negotiation professors. And a few like takeaways from that book that I think I really integrated into like my overall like psyche and like um the way I express in the world and lead. It says like never and it's also the 4 agreements. I think 4
Yeah,
agreements
right.
probably like
And
it's
I was
like
gonna say
never
there's a lists of sort of aphorism and sort of maps for
yep
creating
maps.
and moving through great relation. I mean, my own 9 keys of extraordinary relationship
Mm.
workshops were about making a list of things that you kind of needed to know in order
Mm-hmm.
to make an extraordinary relationship. And so, you know, that was popped into my head. But yeah, definitely 4 agreements. Um, David Richo wrote a
Wait,
book.
like can you tell us, Shivoso, what the 4 agreements are for
All right,
those
let's
who
see if I
don't
can
know what they are?
pull them out of my ass here. It's
Never assume. Never
make
assume.
never make assumptions, right? Don't make any assumptions. Um, and go blank. It's be impeccable with your word.
Mm-hmm.
It's
See if I can find the book.
yeah, no, it's always in the tip of my mind. Do your best is the 4th agreement, and the other one is always
Wait, I have the book right here.
oh yeah.
Let's
It's been a
see.
while. I always forget the 4th one, but it's really
Be
obvious.
be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make
Okay.
assumptions. Always do your best.
So
Don't
those
take
are
anything
4,
personally.
yeah, 4 aphorisms that if you guide your life by them, you're going to navigate more peacefully, right? Um,
Absolutely.
David Richo wrote a book called How to Be an Adult in Relationships, and using these principles, he came up with the 5 A's. And I'm going to see if I can remember the 5 A's that with any relationship between 2 mammals is going to create a good relationship. It's attention, affection, allowance, acceptance, and uh, appreciation.
Mm.
And you know, it's like, okay, there's a list of 5. I came up with communication, sacred sexuality, differentiation, being able me, you, and staying not in.
Wait, slow down, slow down. Start over with your keys.
Oh God, we'd have to do the whole workshop. So I'm just going
Okay,
to
okay.
run through them really fast as if I can remember them all. This came to me actually in a dream state. Um, and they were just presented to me, right? 10 years ago. So anyway, communication, sacred sexuality, differentiation is the skill of um, being not codependent, but not being independent, but to being
Interdependent.
interdependent, right? So
Yeah.
you have to know who you are, and you have to know who they are, and you have to know the relationship between you. And you have to keep those 3 things
Mm,
in full consciousness and awareness, right? Differentiation. It's like individuation, but then in a relational sense.
mm.
Okay, I'm individuated, but I'm not separate from everything else, right? So differentiation. Awareness. It was all about being aware of the moment, being conscious, being here now, right? So, right, each one of these things is a giant section of
Hmm.
meditation that would include things like meditation and whatnot, so that you can say, oh, okay, I'm back to present. I'm not caught in the past or future. I'm right here with you right now, right? That's four out of the nine. Um,
Well, may I interrupt and say
yeah,
something?
we could go
Okay.
on for, I don't want
I
to waste a
know.
lot of time going
And
into it
there's
because
so many maps too. And like permaculture principles, the Burning Man principles, like these maps exist,
these maps exist. That's the point.
and principle based events or principle based relationships, like these are becoming like time tested.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
And
mean,
they're
they've
becoming
been vetted. They've been
enjoyable
vetted. I would
and
say,
very enjoyable.
I would like people to, if they're interested in the list of these maps, to write me and ask, and I'll just send you an overview of all the maps I can think of. And you realize,
That would
oh,
be
they're
cool
all,
for you to just get them together anyways,
yeah. I mean,
start
this is
archiving.
what we want to teach at our workshops is some of these
Yeah.
peace skills, these relational skills. At least introduce the idea, because sometimes all you have to do is say, "Oh, right, I should
I
focus
want to, I
communication,
want to,
sacred sexuality, and learn something about how to relate in a way that actually cultivates a generative, sustainable relationship."
and life. I mean, like, I want to sell people more on peace skills because, like, I think that as I've been like coming into consciousness around peace building skills and like what that's affording me in life is like being able to be around large groups of people and interface with multiple different diverse types of humans from all walks of life and like really like be curious about them and learn from them and like glean a lot of wisdom and magic. Like I was at the rail yard market the other week and I was like talking to this like witchy guy who like develops these perfumes and he's like a total like kind of occult like goddess witchy guy and like was able
Hmm.
to like get in on his gnosis and like learn from him. And then I went to like a booth where a guy was like selling hemp and it's like being able to connect with people in all parts of the plurality is like a very rewarding and enriching experience, and not like moving in with judgment or assumptions and coming in with like curiosity and
Right.
uh,
Or with that me thing, what can I get out of this?
sure.
I'm in a kind of a battle, trying to get advantage, over the other, which is a lot of what human
Right.
interaction is really this sort of strange kind of micro battles,
That's so alienating.
yeah,
That's so
it's
alienating. I mean,
fragmenting, and we can't afford it anymore because we're all squished in together now with 8 billion of us. We're seeing the results of that competitive mindset. That's what empire is all about. That's what patriarchy is all about, is
exactly.
we win, you lose, zero sum games. And so that's, in our day-to-day interactions with others, with these relational skills, you can actually kind of like kung fu these interactions into something that's mutually beneficial. Um, Unless the other person is actually trying to harm you and
Right.
will not relent. And then it's like, okay, that's a whole different kind of
Well,
interactions.
that's when you need to practice discernment, agency, and listen, and have hopefully an intelligence of your intuition to be able to walk away, or at least like, you know, you can
Yeah.
either absorb it, reflect it, or move away in love. You
I, I,
know,
I love this term relationship Aikido, because it can actually get into actual Aikido, which is never, it's not an attacking martial art. It's purely defensive and immobilizing. So you can
mm.
actually verbally immobilize someone who's attacking you, or you can, it's by moving away, fight the battles that are worth fighting. Run fu is really a good martial art. Way, it's like I'm walking away. I'm not engaging in the play that you're offering me. In the game that you're offering me, you're offering a zero sum game. I'm not going to play. I don't have to. But sometimes we get stuck in situations where we're in those, and
Well,
we
and
figure out a way to make it work.
yeah, well, and sometimes hopefully they're overt, sometimes they're covert, and then that's problematic
Well,
too. I mean,
the worst is when a partner, a
mm,
romantic partner who is competitive, who is
yeah,
zero summing, who wants to win. And this is often where a lot of the relational trauma and strife come from, is this mindset of, I have to win, I have to be right, I have to control, so I feel
where
threatened.
does that come from? Like, I
Oh,
know I've experienced that as in like I've been that person, a dominator in relationships where I've like it comes from insecurity.
It's been rooted in fear. It's absolutely
Yeah.
rooted in fear, which is rooted in the fear of disappearing, death, not being important.
Parents,
You know, it's
parents.
like it
Yeah.
reflects all the way up, but it really comes down to I'm significant and I need to make sure that I'm okay, that I'm safe. And that's what,
Yeah.
you know, the ego does. That's what the left brain does, is make sure you're safe and in control.
But
So
it's actually insane when you're putting yourself in an unsafe situation, like, and then begging for safety.
yeah, and it's really insane to that's just sort of one of the psychological traps that we get into because of the way our brains are wired. And it's also insane because it's absolutely suicidal for the entire species.
Well, and it's political. It's
Yeah.
political.
Yeah, it just
Like,
reflects all the
it's,
way
you
out,
don't,
all the
we're
way
like,
out.
I was listening to a historian yesterday talk about the definition of slavery and like how actually right now on our planet there are more slaves than there ever have been.
Right.
And
And we're just
there's like,
volunteering for it.
right, there's the wage slave, right? There's a spectrum of slavery. And like, you could argue that a woman living under like, even in America, like in the sense of like reproductive rights being completely abolished at this point, it's like, what defines a slave, and that, what defines the power dynamic in that
It's the
slave
lack of,
master.
autonomy and choice.
Exactly.
If you have no choice, if you have no sovereignty in any area, that's an area of slavery. Like
And if you're told, I was told,
I cannot leave this room because I'm punching a clock. That is
right,
that's it's a on the spectrum of slavery.
correct. And
My
as
my
a
child
woman, like
is needs
growing
me,
up,
you know. I'm late, I'm 10
growing,
minutes late. It's like you get fired.
right, right. That's wage slavery. And then like, I think that I was and have been am like subject to a form of slavery, even though I was told like, no, you're free, like gaslit into believing you're free and equal. You have autonomy, you have bodily autonomy, you have agency. Like, actually, not so much. Like, I wasn't given an education around my body. I wasn't given agency around my body
Right?
through literally just like anatomy, like understanding my own body. I mean, those are
Yeah, it's
learning objectives that have been deliberately like removed from our collective curriculums,
what's frightening is it's subtly growing and growing and growing. If you've ever been into the medical industrial complex, if you've ever actually had a serious issue that was medical, you realize they just sweep you up and take away all of your, it's like, nope, we're going to give you this drug. Nope, you can't leave. Nope, you can't work. And it's like, you can, but
Yeah,
you gotta fight. You gotta fight for your right to like know what drug is this? What are the side effects? Why should I be taking it? It turns out, oh, well, we're covering our ass. You know, we're not going to let you leave because we don't want to get sued. Even though you're like, no, I don't want that treatment. They still insist, you know, they can't make you do it, but they make it so difficult for you to say no. They frighten the hell out of you. And you just,
absolutely.
who knows about, you know, who gets trained in medical stuff enough to kind of like, well, I got to trust you. Okay. I'll just do that, you know. And it's like, oh yeah, by the way, that vaccine like made your heart, I won't say it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, no, that's exactly why I got vaccinated. I like was in the hospital and like literally was like pretty much like assuaged or coerced into it in a way, and like I was very vulnerable. And then I also got the second Pfizer vaccine because I was on tour and with an artist who I guess I won't say who it was, but she forced me to get the vaccine. So it's like, but in that sense, I was a wage slave. Like I couldn't afford not to be on that job. Like I just couldn't afford not to. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, like what you're saying though, it's all reminding me of something you talked to me a lot about, which is marrying yourself. And I kind of want to just like, I don't know how much time we have left, but I want to break that down
We probably got
because
about 10 minutes left before
okay,
our hour is up. I'm just guessing it.
I think that we could break down this idea of marrying yourself because all of what we've been saying is kind of kept circling my mind's eye back to this idea of loving yourself. Like, and these principles as like kind of roadmaps to a state where you're loving yourself. And there's a lot of talk about like self-care and self-love. And like, I think that's really like kind of fuzzy. It's like, what does it really mean to love yourself? Like to really care for yourself, to be an advocate for yourself, showing up as a sovereign, interdependent beings in your community, in your relationships. I think that can be a easy way to create the fertility of symbiosis. And I think that
Right.
if
It's
we
very
could at least
basic
start
route.
there.
Yeah. It's a very basic route to you're right. Self-love is a overused and underdefined term, but I did marry myself 22 years ago because it was till death do I part. So it has something to do with eternity and death and soul. It's like, oh, my soul is sovereign. My body, you can do anything you want to, but I have no fear of, I would rather die than be a slave easily, right? And so you, as the slavery spectrum goes, you keep going back to your dignity and sovereignty. Not that you're completely separate and not responsible for your actions or for the relationships, right? You're actually hyper responsible for everything around you, but at the same time, you have that sense of like, no, I have to look to my soul first, to my heart first, it's like, is this in alignment with me? And we make sacrifices, we make compromises. Sometimes we will get a wage slave job, but it's with a purpose towards something. Am I learning something? Am I feeding my children? What am I responsible for that I'm
How can we
trading away some of that
differentiate
sovereignty?
how can we differentiate between self-love uh
Your
and
video just went
narcissism?
off.
Oh, sorry. Self-love and narcissism. Like, because we were talking
Right?
about like I think these are like the kind of duality points where like there's this Goldilocks zone, right? Like there's like this inversion point or inflection point where it's like marrying yourself isn't about like it's all about me. It's about like, no,
Right?
I'm taking responsibility to care for myself, for my shadows, for my like immediate needs, not, not placing that as a burden on anyone else,
Right.
I mean, and then it's like, I think that there's a really clear differentiation that needs to be
You
made.
you you nailed it. The word is responsibility. In other
Yep.
words, you are actually aware of the interdependence of you and everyone else at the same time that you are treating yourself in this way, right? Because to love the self is to love the other. You have to realize, oh, I am you and you are me and it is me as well. So I respect this bug. I respect this cat. I respect this dog, sovereignty, well-being, because if I don't take care of you, then I'm not taking care of me. In a sense, it's really easy because you get an immediate feedback. If you're not treating your partner in such a way that they're thriving, in such a way that they feel that they have their autonomy and sovereignty and their power, you're
Mm-hmm.
not, then you have to live with them as a broken person, as a dependent, as a person who's having emotional trauma. It's like, oh, you're actually creating the environment, you're creating your own hell. Because if
That's,
you've
I mean,
ever
that's
been in,
codependency.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, okay, so you in an abusive relationship, the abuser is actually creating their own hell, and
Yeah.
everybody's in it, right? And there's only one way to
Right.
break it, and that's to leave. You got to just
Exactly.
break it, right? The abuser has to stop. It's not the victim's
Well,
responsibility.
because the abuser at any and all costs will stay in control, therefore like creating a hell.
It
It's
creates
also a
hell.
hell. I mean, okay, what did I want to say? Yeah, responsibility. Okay, I guess I feel called to say, especially to women, and actually Gabor Mate is kind of on a kick right now talking about like that women have more autoimmune disorders than men, and it's because of blah blah blah. We can break that
True.
down,
Yeah.
or why, but like it's, the way Gabor Mate puts it is that it's because like women are always constantly like caring for anything other than themselves.
Right.
And
They're
like,
more wired that way in general. We're going to talk generalities again, but in general, yes, they are more.
well, and I think that maternal instincts or that has been exploited, and then also combine that with the lack of bodily autonomy and lack of rights or lack of education. Like a woman is kind of like stuck in this like immediate paralyzed codependent state. And I think that like it's important, or can be, and I think it's important that women like the way that you would treat and care for like your prince in shining armor, or the way you would treat and care for your husband or your children or your cat or your rose garden, like turn that towards you.
Right. because you are sacred too, right? And the other word, responsibility and interdependence rather than codependence. And there's another whole like conversation about that subtle difference between
Yeah.
being interdependent and being codependent. And it's easy to spectrum or get pushed into codependence through our neurobiology, through our acculturation, through our traumas, through our conditionings. We tend to like, and so that nurturing instinct, or that, I hate these words, but that nurturing part of the feminine is also available to the masculine, but we suppress it. We try to stay independent from everything and separate from everything. It's interesting that men die of heart attacks more often
Mm.
than women. Their heart gives out, right? Because they're just shutting their heart down and not allowing themselves to be in true emotional contact with the other, right? They're
Mm.
fully independent. We're taught not to cry, hold our emotions in, to win at all
Mm.
costs, to stay separate. And now, epidemics of loneliness and suicide in the masculine, in the men, as well as heart attacks, all centered on this, you know, area, whereas women seem to have a lot of womb issues, um,
Hmm.
endometriosis and
PCOSS,
stomach issues,
PMDD.
and lower
Yeah.
those lower areas where men tend to die from here up somehow.
Mm.
Prostate
Wow.
cancer, it's all the same wound, right? I had prostate cancer, and I know right where that came from, psycho energetically. It was
Yeah.
not just because of bad luck or genetics. There was definitely a lot of wounding that went on there.
Oh, I can feel, I've been feeling into my womb lately, especially in yoga, and just feeling the gravity she has, like, and like all of the, I mean, stories I've attached to it and stories I've inherited around it.
Right? Yeah.
And yeah, yeah, it's real.
I
That's
think
this
that's
that's psychosomatic, or like this the psychic intuitions around these things. Like they are not to be ignored.
No, I think you
Or
hit on another key. The awareness key is yoga, is actually being body aware in a deep
mm,
contemplative sense, is being in contact with those parts that are wounded, the conditionings, the places where it lands in the body and stays, is like recognizing it's there, talking to it. It's like holding your womb while it's heavy, it's like, and purging, coming back to the cycles,
and also accepting its heaviness, like,
Yeah,
also,
yeah, not rejecting it and not saying,
yeah.
oh, I need you to get better right now.
Or you
I do
need
that
to
with,
like conform to this shape, or you need to like look like hollow, or you need to look thin. Like I just think
right,
I think about the Venus figurines and a lot of the figurines and like the clay pots and like the bowls and the chalices. Like these are round things, these are full
right.
of the potential. They're
Yeah,
full
the
of the
world is
empty
round.
space.
She's
The
sexy.
world is round. Exactly. And it's like, because like I pressure myself. I'm just like, specifically, I'll pressure myself into be like, well, why can't you do a headstand right away? Or why can't you do lotus pose? And it's like, a lot of the asana was built for like flexible 12-year-old boys in India. It's
Right. They're
like,
under nutrition. They didn't have a whole lot of muscle
and I'm
fiber.
like, you know what? My ass and my womb are heavy, and that's okay.
It's really
And
about the mental awareness rather than the asana or reaching any particular position. I can sit here in my chair, call this an asana, go into my breath, begin to meditate, and then go down into my body. And I do this all the time. I need to talk to my prostate. What's up, bro? It's like, I know it's been a little rough, but you don't have to, warn me with cancer that I'm not giving you enough attention. I got you,
mm,
I see what I was doing wrong, and so here's some love. Here's some
mm.
holding it. Thank you for, giving me the heads up that I wasn't flying quite right, that I was in toxic situations. And
And by the way, you're doing so well. You look so healthy, and you're on a roll, and I'm so proud of you.
yeah, I'm on a roll, I'm on a
You're
roll.
on
But I'm also in deep appreciation, coming back to that death thing. That's a whole nother thing. I mean, we're running out of time, but memento mori. I was just reminded that I am mortal, and even though I look great, I am 65, and there's a time limit on well-being. And so, my plan is to be like super healthy, and then just, but that's everybody's plan, you know. But the reality is like I have to resist. Psychoenergetically, I don't want to just go down for bad, stupid reasons. Like, oh, I've been carrying a wound that I've been
Mm,
ignoring.
mm,
My heart has been broken too many times. I'm going to stop breaking my heart over these memes, this conditioning that I had about how relationships supposed to arise, how it's supposed to be conducted, how it's supposed to end. You know, I've been
mm,
reprogramming that forever, you know, it's like, and it's tough. It comes back, but now something in me snapped.
mm.
And it's really nice to be finally growing up, even though it took a fucking long time to get there.
Well, I mean, it's also just like there's so much asymmetry and spirals to this, and like your wisdom is clearly gleaned from decades and decades of love and experience. So,
Yeah, and
I
doing it
mean,
wrong. You know, I mean, I that's how
doing it
you
wrong.
fall off the bike.
Yeah, but
So,
like,
you
is
know,
it wrong? Is it wrong to have
no,
like
it
put your?
isn't.
It isn't wrong.
It isn't wrong because I'm able to like analyze and interpret and study and give it back. So that was really the
Well,
point of all those broken hearts was really to, you know, so I could learn how to help other people avoid those situations. And
right. Well, and also getting your heart broken, like breaking it open is part of the key. It's part of the key. And
it's
I think
absolutely necessary. It's an
yes,
initiation, you know.
it's
Um,
totally.
if it isn't romantic love that's going to break your heart open, it's the death of a child, or it's the
Or
death
a
of
pets
a
or
pet, or it's the horror of the world. You know, it's
right.
like if you're not paying attention, you need to get cracked open that yeah, life has this other aspect to it, you know, and death is really it. It really, you know, suffering and death is part of the gig, right? So a loving acceptance of the fact that I'm going to fail at some point is also part of um
Mm.
that ride. It's like, oh yay, I get to go. I get to get off this fucking thing, you know? It's like I get to go back to the one. So it's
Back to mother.
yeah, it's a
Back
privilege,
to
you
mother.
know, but the going is not easy. I'm not fooling around. It's not going to be fun. But if I'm surrounded by the people I love, that's my goal. Is like I want to be surrounded by people who love me and help me over and not in some fucking hospital surrounded by strangers.
Well,
You
now we're really
know, that
getting into
poke and
it.
prod me and drug me and you know give me a bunch of opiates and shit. You know, it's like no, I want to
There is a
for God.
there's a difference between annihilation and returning to the mother. There's a
Yeah,
difference between transmutation and there's a difference between abrupt annihilation ending.
yeah,
Like I think like not to even just like break it up into two distinct categories, but like I'm part of my studies in matrilineal tradition, folk, pre-patriarchal conditions. It's like there was this very intimate relationship with death. Death wasn't what we call death. Like death
no,
isn't this like endpoint. Death was this transmutation. You return to the mother, you return to her womb, literally the womb of the earth to be recycled. And
right?
it's like and it was like
Nothing to
part
be
of this
afraid
like
of. You know,
sacred dance. It's
it's painful. It's hard. It's sad, but it's not something to be fearful of because it's happening all around you. It's happening all the time. The
I mean
bacteria
it's happening, yeah, right now it's
right
happening
now,
to us.
within and without, all over the world.
When we go to sleep every night, like we're kind of in
The
that
little
dance.
death, yeah, the little like,
Yes.
where do you go when you sleep?
When we're
Yeah,
bleeding, we have our menstruations a little death. We're constantly in this life dance balance, but I do think that right now we are coming up against like total patriarchal annihilation versus like we actually can like if we can get over the fear of death or whatever we're saying death is, you know, if we can over that fear of separation, that fear
yeah,
of separation, I think we can return to what our ancestors knew and practiced, which was like rituals around like being around your mother clan when you died and returning to wombs that were like
yeah. Recycling and
intentionally,
composting, you know, it's
yes,
like the psyche,
exactly.
spirit, and the body, you know, and not make a cult of death that is that thinks that uploading your consciousness into a computer is a fucking good idea.
Yeah.
You know,
Or
it's
going
like,
to
no, I'm gonna
Mars
live
is the
forever.
thing.
It's like, no, you don't want to do that.
You want to live an extra 50 years on Mars? Like, are you out of your fucking mind?
Right? It's like you're gonna live in a capsule like 6 by 6. It's like, yeah, You can do it now.
No water, no
Yeah, just
trees, no birds singing. Are you
yeah,
out of your fucking
and
mind?
if you leak, if you pop a leak, you're dead. So don't step outside.
They're
Uh,
not even, they are, well, that's out of your mind, like mind over matter. I think about that, like mind over mother, which has been like the story of patriarchy or dominator culture, dominator society, the story of separation, mind over matter, mother. And when really like mind is mother.
right? And
Mother is mind.
there's no separation. E equals MC
No.
squared. It's like, it's like, oh, it's all on a balanced equation where everything's interconnected. The universe is relationship.
Mm.
It's
Hmm.
relationship. It's not matter. It's not bits and pieces. It just looks like it is. And
And the stories we tell ourselves are so important. And the
this is really
storyteller.
key. This is why we're doing these talks, is because what we're doing is we're talking story. We're talking about the story that we're experiencing now, but we're also talking, and what we don't want to do is remythologize relationship, bring a new story in about why we do it and how we do it, that is really more interconnected to the whole, not just me, not just profit, not just getting your needs met, but a deeper sort of sense of why are we doing what we're doing. And that's what's been sort of cut out. And that's at the root of the problems in our culture. And one of the places we can actually do this work is in our intimate relationships, because there is such magnetic draw to it. Almost nobody doesn't want to connect, to have a relationship.
To have friends, to have like to have sexual partners,
Yeah,
to have
look at the drive for sex.
mentors.
We've been sold, everything is sold through sex because it's so powerful. But let's
Mhm.
sell a new story about what reality actually is and what's possible. That will turn things around to bring the sacred back into relationship. Intimate relationships is just a one small step away from making everything around you sacred. So these peace skills we talk about are really peace skills for everything. It's like you can have peace skills with rocks, and you better
Mhm.
the soil,
Mhm.
with the house you live in. It's a living entity. It's like treat your house like a living entity, and you've
You know
got
what I've been
a whole
saying
different
lately,
gig.
Shivoso? I've been saying remattering,
Yeah,
remattering, but like have it matter again, have it
yeah,
mother again.
yeah. And
This
winning
like,
through having a great relationship is kind of like a side effect, but we're going to focus on relationship rather than trying to fix the whole world. We're going to catch everybody by their second chakra and their heart chakra, and we're going to push them towards waking up to what's possible. That's why relationship medicine is important to me.
and I'm on that journey. I mean, I feel like we're all on this journey together. It's not like we
Yeah.
know. We
No,
don't
you don't know.
know.
We're all on the journey together. You and I especially know that we're kind of like parallel lives in this stuff. And what's really beautiful about these conversations is people listen to this and they're going to go, yeah, me too. Me too. I've had that experience. I don't know what the fuck happens. Why is my partner so mean to me? Why am I so mean to my partner? Why are we constantly bickering with each other? Why are we in this power dynamic of adversarial feeling? And then we try to make love, but it's just sometimes fucking, or it doesn't happen at all. And it's like, what is going wrong with this beautiful thing called relationship? This incredible, juicy, yummy.
And it resonates and impacts every aspect of life. Like I was seeing a friend who was teaching me some skills in on my DJ machine, on my DJ controller, and he has disappeared from the planet because he reconnected with his ex, who is like, I mean, it is a total disaster of a situation, and like, I mean, it's such a codependent nightmare, and like I haven't heard from him in days. And like, I know that, his partner, she's incredibly like jealous, doesn't want him to have friendships, doesn't want him to have, and it's like, this is impacting directly the community. Like, this
Right.
isn't just
Everybody,
some,
everybody loses,
everybody loses.
is this insecurity, which is,
Yeah.
it's all on one hand, it's kind of natural and organic because you do get really high and you get over obsessed with each other. But then there's the fear and the insecurity because you don't have any backups. Like that one person becomes your absolute lifeline to happiness or something, security. And so you can't even like let them go out and have friends, especially of
Yeah.
your same gender, is like, oh shit, you
And
know.
it's not even about like the sex, I think she for a second like used the language of like, I'm not, comfortable with you being around like another woman kind of thing. But it's not even about that. It's the fact that like him and I had a friendship that was like rooted in value and also in creativity. Like we were creating something together. And like I personally believe that hit on some sort of note where she was insecure about her own creative powers or her.
Absolutely. The solution to all these things is more relationship. Is
Yep.
if
Yeah.
if you have a relationship with your friend's spouse that is peaceful and positive and trusting, you're good to go. It's
Exactly.
just that they project onto you. You're just this mysterious other that has just
Yep.
a face, a name at most, right? And they can project all of their fears onto you because, hey, that shit does happen. It's fucking common that people cheat
Yep.
and people like, leak out their energy and they kind of give it away. And it's because we're all not in relationship. We're not in right relationship. We're not doing it
Exactly.
well. We're doing it all these individual like separate atoms trying to become molecules, but we're not making three. We're not making water. We're just making oxygen and hydrogen, trying to do these dyadic molecules. And it's like, no, you got to be part of a matrix. You're part of a community. You're actually part of a village. So
Absolutely. And like that's really again, like that's kind of like the aim or intention here. It's like we want to rematter and revillage.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
what we'd like because
These
I
are
it's
all
time tested.
yeah, time tested, 30,000 years is like that worked.
And we've experienced it in pockets, like right in these like in these temporary autonomous moments of like at Burning Man or at Momentum or at Cosmic Campout. Like we've
Mhm.
experienced and it's juicy and it's good and
Yeah,
it's like it
people
works.
experience it at sporting events. Suddenly you're all on the same team.
Right.
And it's like everybody gets along great. They're all standing in line getting hot dogs, and they hate the other team, but they love their team, so they all wear their team colors, and they feel super
Right.
comfortable all doing the wave together. And it's like, oh, we're just
Well, but that's kind of like
here.
tribalism in a way, though. I'd
Yeah,
say
well,
sports is a
it's also
bit more.
community. It's also a fragment of what community,
It's a fragment.
the joy and the ease that comes from having
Hmm.
shared values,
Group
and,
harmony.
and
Yeah.
shared purpose. So
But there's a difference between just like that kind of like fragment of the village being kind of exploited towards like kind
oh
of
yeah,
tribalism and then
it's
more like
definitely
the group, like something like Burning Man, where like we're creating something together, gifting economy, like no commerce, like there's really like more like complex
yeah,
adaptations
well,
happening in that
sports goes
village.
on for 3 hours, but a Burning Man was a week, and there's other adventures. A lot of people went to summer camp and realized that you just formed a community with all those
Right.
kids, and it was like you didn't want to go. You were like, no, I want to stay with you guys. It's like we could do things together. It's super fun, and I feel safe and whole. And instead, we go to jobs, and we get our commuter cars where we hate every other car on the road because and we're not in a community.
It's
No.
insane. I was thinking exactly that, Shivoso, that like the moments where I feel like I'm like re healing my childhood, or like it's not even like I'm healing my childhood. It's like I'm actually living a healthy adulthood when I'm like in that like state with others where like we're being creative and expressive together and feeling safe to like create together, and like whether that's like cooking meals together or like gardening together or creating art together or like having events like.
Yeah.
And it
Well,
reminds me of childhood, not because it's childish, but because in childhood there was that uninhibited like feeling and like and freedom in a way. Like kids are kind of granted that freedom to create those communities.
and to associate. Yeah. They're
Yeah.
associative. You go to the beach and you can just get a bunch of friends together suddenly. It's like I watched it just the other day at a birthday party with a bunch of little kids. And they didn't know each other at the beginning, but by the end they were all best friends, and it just took a few hours of doing something together. Right.
Well, that's like at medicine circles or like in yeah, plant medicine circles when you gather and you do that work
Absolutely.
together, you're immediately friends for
Rituals.
life.
Yeah, ritual is absolutely essential to community. That's why rituals are important. Wow, we just really hit a lot of stuff this time. I hope that people like enjoyed this rambling conversation. We really started out with matriarchy and patriarchy, and we ended up in a lot of places. Um, I really love these conversations because I
Me
could talk to
too.
you for hours, and it's a little self-congratulatory, but I'm like, yeah, Haiku, let's do this again in a couple of weeks, and you know, put it back out there. Um, do you have a website yet or anything that you're offering your cycles yet? Your cycle
I
awareness
actually
yet?
am offering a cycle awareness, my first cycle health course in Albuquerque here, but it's all kind of like word of mouth, flyering, kind of direct marketing I'm
But
doing.
you're
I am,
yeah, you're just starting to do this. It's gonna get bigger. We're gonna do more.
yeah,
And
I'm gonna have Adele get the website cooking for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, for sure. And Shivoso, you can always find me, shivoso.com, do my astrology and stuff like
Well, I
that.
guess if people want to reach me, they can email me haiku
Yeah,
rebel,
just
haiku rebel, or I could send it to haiku rebel at proton.me.
yeah. I know we're throwing these things out into the wilderness right now. I mean, but if anybody's listening and gets to this point, please like subscribe, hit a like, do the YouTube thing for us because we just don't even know. It's like this is the second one. We're just gonna keep going until we run out of things to talk about. Ha ha ha. Because I think it's important. And I just love the idea that maybe one or two people get to listen to it. That would be awesome.
Yes, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, these are all archived. We'll look back on these in 20 years for sure.
And we'll get better at it, I think, you know.
You mean less rambling and less all over the place, but I don't think so. I think by scattershotting, we're starting to get closer to some of the key issues. Like you talked about the maps, and finding peace skills and soft skills. And we want to talk more about, how do people develop those soft skills and those peace skills? Because like
Yeah.
you said, it's not just about your intimate relationship. That's just the practice crucible where you learn how to do it.
I also think too, we could all like improve on this by not like I feel rushed sometimes. I'm like, oh, we only have an hour, but if we just talk and then it's just like cut ourselves off right at the hour, you know what I mean? Like talk as if we have infinite hours.
Right. Well,
And then
some people do 2 and 3 hour talks, and they're great if you have 2 or 3 hours to give. But
I like an
it's,
hour.
yeah, eventually we'll get some sound bites out of this, and we'll just do it all like commercially. We'll get an AI to do all the work for us. Everything we dislike about modern culture, we'll just be utilizing the tools. We already are, but I'll see you out in the garden, okay?
Thanks, Shivoso.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, bye. Bye.